Awesome Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. This is going to be my Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic issue review catch-up. We got 45 coming in a few weeks, pretty soon-ish, but I figured this was a good, time to catch up right before that comes out, and I'll probably do an individual review for at least that one. I kind of group them based on significant events happening, but I just recently caught up because I was a little bit behind, and I figured there was enough decent stuff to talk about to do a catch up leading into the next issue, and there was a couple little debuts and stuff too which are worth talking about. I think I left off in individual reviews around 41 or 42. I'm just going to talk about sort of the broad strokes of the plot and not go issue by issue, page by page. Alright, so page 42. No, I'm just kidding. Page 4. I was going to say issue 42 and then I said page 42 and I messed it up. So basically, we still have the two main plots going on, but they've started to converge a little bit because you have the Omega Rangers doing their thing and then the MMPR team sort of struggling to deal with all the new status quo stuff. And the most major things that were happening were the Omega Rangers went undercover at this alien party, which was a really cool scene. I really liked the sort of galactic adventure story side of the Omega Ranger stuff when they were undercover, and there was a cliffhanger where the villain lady who was hosting the party was like, "I know you're here, Rangers." That's what happened, and then they morph and fight, and it was a really cool just setting, I guess. I really liked that. And during that fight, when they got found out, they debuted their weapons, which I didn't even think about. Everyone was talking about the Zords and stuff, and we got to look at the Zords, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But we got to look at them at the Comic-Con panel or whatever. But they actually debuted the weapons, and they're fine. I like them just fine. I think they're cool ideas. They kind of remind me of the Die Ranger weapons, where I just don't feel like they're memorable. I mean, I remember what they are, but I don't know if you know what I mean. It's kind of a hard thing to describe, but a lot of the times, PR and Sentai weapons will have a distinct look compared to just a normal sword you would see. And I feel a lot of the Die Ranger weapons are just basic, so they don't even look like necessarily Toku weapons, and this is kind of the way I feel about the Omega weapons. Jason's got basically a katana. I think Trini's the one with the hammer. Someone has a hammer. Zach, I think, has, I don't know the name of it. Someone will, but it's that, on a chain triangle blade thing. And then I think Blue has a javelin. Initially, I thought it was just a bow staff because there was a couple of panels where it was cut off. But, I like the concept of them. They just don't strike me as memorable. They just look like normal weapons. But it was cool to see them because I actually wasn't thinking about that. So they kind of fight their way out, and there was kind of a debate about this person they were locking up about well, he deserves a chance to redeem himself, and then the emissary is like, "Brrr, look at my face change." That was the exact dialogue. What's her face? I forget her name at the moment, but Blue of the Omega Rangers was like, "Well, I've killed thousands of people, or hundreds of people, or lots of people, or at least more than one peoples. I deserve a chance of redemption." I was like, "Oh, that's a revelation." And she said, was it her family she killed? That reminds me of Heatwave's backstory, I burned my family alive and I like to play with fire, or whatever he said to Kara when he met her, which was really funny. But that was an interesting revelation and some interesting tension and stuff there going on with that. And then back on Earth, we're basically been dealing with the fact that they're getting used to the new team dynamic because, they don't work together as a well-oiled unit because there's 3 new people, and the 3 new people are rookies, and then Tommy's getting used to being leader as well as his new powers, and then that's brought to a head by Dane, who shows up and fights them, and then Tommy winds up getting injured, so they're out a leader. That's one more person they're out of that was part of the original team dynamic. And then they end up getting really owned, in the Thunder Zord, Dane's about to destroy them, he's got the Thunder Zord on the ropes. And sometime before the fight with the Megazord, Kim gives Trini a voicemail and says, "I know you guys are off changing the world or whatever, but I can't help but feel like you abandoned us and we could really use some help." And then cut to later, when the Thunder Zord's being stabbed to death, the Omega Rangers show up in the Zords we saw. It was cool to get a look at them at the Comic-Con panel, but I'm not a spoiler complainer guy. As far as I'm concerned, once you put the information out there, it's not a spoiler anymore, especially if they officially reveal it. That's not a spoiler, that's just, information. I'm not that type of person that's really sensitive about spoilers, but I don't know why comics will always show stuff that could be a cool moment. Even Draken. That would have been such a holy crap moment when you turn the page, but no, let's do a press release. That would be like Endgame or Rise of Skywalker or any other major movie doing a press release for the major plot reveals. Like I said, I'm not a spoiler guy, but I think it's just counterproductive. I get you're trying to generate press for the comic, but can't you generate it afterwards? Like, let everyone be like, holy crap, big moment, then you do the press release. Anyway, that was a mini rant. It's like, logically, I don't understand it. Zords show up, and they actually end up getting Dane and capturing him, and the Zords, my opinions haven't really changed on them. I still think they're fine. I'm not jumping out of my seat over them. As you can see, I'm still seated, but I do like the concept of them, of the sort of ancient, almost Gollum-looking bit, and it was cool to see them show up. And then, you know, the Omega Rangers are out, and I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna know they're here. And, like, obviously the MMPR Rangers know the Omega Rangers are here, but they don't reveal their identities, which was interesting. I mean, imagine at some point, before the end of the Earth, they will reveal their identities, but I honestly thought they were going to. But I'm glad they didn't right away. It kind of creates a sense of mystery. And then when they go back to the command center, they're like, WTF, mate, I thought Sam was the only Omega Ranger. And then Zordon says that, oh, those are the Omega Rangers. They didn't say the Omega Ranger thing. He said, you know, didn't know that was sarcasm. But he said, like, oh, the Omega Rangers were basically like an ancient group of rangers that, you know, sort of operated in the shadows, you know, that they kind of took out threats, and like that was cool because we could tell by the suits and stuff that they were more ancient-y powers, to use a technical term. But it was cool to hear Zordon acknowledge them and get a little peek into the lore that the Omega Rangers almost seem like an ancient sect of a secret team. Not a secret team, but more like a covert team, like sort of, you know what I mean? And so that was kind of cool, and then it just kind of makes me more feel the vibe of the Zords too, that they're kind of older and stuff, and you know, they've been brought into activation, the powers and the Zords and all that by the new team, and I thought that was really cool. And then Tommy wakes up and he's like, no, he didn't say that, but you even did, you couldn't hear him because it's a comic. And then the Omega Rangers were talking with the emissary about like how they felt bad about not revealing their identities, and the emissary then said, like, you know, we can't, I don't remember if it was the emissary that said it or somebody on the team said it on behalf of what the emissary was talking about, but somebody said, like, we can't reveal ourselves because it'll mess with the new timeline. And so I'm like, oh, this is really funny, this is a journey. Because I was like, okay, that makes sense. So, I mean, the emissary changes back and forth between seasons that haven't even happened yet in this timeline. So he obviously knows the way things are supposed to go. So I'm like, okay, so they're trying to keep the timeline intact of, you know, what happened in MMPR, basically. But then they're like, well, we need to help in some way, and they lead an attack on Zed's castle. And there was a really funny little bit about what's a Bandora, referencing the Bandora's Palace from the Palace from the G-Ranger footage, which was neat. But I was like mixed on this, not that I didn't want it to happen, but I was confused because I was like, oh, that makes sense. They don't want to reveal they're the Omega Rangers because then that would mess up the timeline that we know too much of what the main beats of MMPR are. You know, the Rangers aren't supposed to come back. Jason comes back in Zeo. But then, obviously, going to Zed's castle to either capture him or take him out would mess up the timeline, but they really seem to be struggling with Zed, so I don't know, maybe I misinterpreted it, maybe it'll be fleshed out a little bit more in the next couple issues and I'll sort of understand, but that did confuse me a little bit. I thought it was really cool to see them charge the castle though. I always hated that, oh, don't escalate the battle unless Rita forces you to. I'm like, oh yeah, wouldn't want to win the fight, let's just wait for somebody to be injured. So I actually like that proactive approach. I thought it was far too goody two-shoes that they would never just go to the base, like, you know where she is, done blow her ass up. I like that. I thought that was really cool to see. And I think the two biggest beats, obviously, or three, are the debut of the Zords, the weapons, and then the fact that the Omega Rangers and the MMPR team are crossing paths with Dane and all that stuff kind of coming together. Your coming together will be your undoing. Sorry, I'm on a Star Wars kick. But anyway, so that's happening, but it's a lot of setup, but I really like a lot of the dynamics going on. There's obviously a little bit of tension going on with the Omega Rangers, but I like the general plot of that. I like that sort of space adventure vibe, like I said, and I think it's really cool that we're actually delving into issues the show never did, of the Rangers having a hard time with all the team changes, and they make them seem really bad because the Omega Rangers came in and just owned them, and they have like only 4 people, and I think that's really neat because in the show it's just like, oh, kumbaya, let's just forget everyone's names and go sing together. And I like that it's a little bit more difficult, and I like exploring that, and it's interesting to see, like, it's cool to see all the big plot stuff and all that, but I really like the character stuff too, which they do a pretty good job in with the comics. What they did with Tommy as well is exploring actual repercussions and in-depth stuff about these situations, where especially in MMPR got glossed over with like friendship nonsense. But yeah, overall, I think it's been very enjoyable. I think the quality has maintained certainly better than it was in Beyond the Grid, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. Like I said, when 45 comes out, I'll probably do at least one individual review, and then I'll sort of feel it out from there as per usual and sort of base it around big events. But until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps, entering that bell so you can get the notifications for all my videos. Helps me out a lot. Thanks guys, Dawson Ryder, signing out.